Okay, welcome everyone to this morning's practice period. People are still entering the Zoom room. Some of you who have been on for a minute or two may have noticed that the woodpeckers are joining us again in the Zoom room. They seem to like this time of morning to drill on the side of the building, and there's one of them that's kind of like right above my head in the skylight area who is dropping acorns into the not the downspout, but the gutters, and banging on the metal. Sometimes it's right above me and sometimes it's over to the left, but we will accept them for what they are. Maybe some good will come from it if they can hear actually through the building. Another, just as sort of a little technical note, last year when we were doing this retreat, we actually got a comment not a complaint, but more of a comment that when we were giving talks or reflections, oftentimes, or most of the time actually, it looked like we were looking at the floor and facing down and not into the camera. And the reason for that is that our camera in the hall here is perched on the ceiling above the doors in the back of the hall. So to actually look straight into the camera like I'm doing right now, have to kind of tilt my head back, and it's kind of an uncomfortable position, doesn't feel very natural. So please pardon us if it looks like we're kind of looking down and not attending to our group of people here. But I can see all sorts of little boxes of people on our screen, which is right below that camera. So we're here and present with you, even if it doesn't look like we're looking straight into the camera. Okay, so settling down for a period of meditation. This morning, the closing reflection that we chanted was on the 32 parts of the body. And I thought, well, that makes a good topic for contemplating, and maybe talk a little bit about how to use that. It's one of my go-to contemplations in my practice since the very beginning of my monastic training as an anagarika, and still use it very often, both sitting and walking meditation as a meditation object, the 32 parts of the body. And just a little background as to how these kind of contemplations fit in to the overall scheme of meditation. Because I think there's misunderstandings of some of the words, or actually there's conflicting ways that people use basic terms in meditation. And just spend a couple minutes here kind of ferreting through that. And if you find how different people use words like mindfulness, concentration, samatha, vipassana, jhana, if you find it confusing, it's because it is confusing the way that people use it, because different people use them in different ways to point to different experiences. Confusion arises because sometimes they do seem to conflict with each other. So, oftentimes you hear of people asking, people might ask us, oh, well, do you teach samatha meditation or do you teach vipassana meditation? Or do you practice samatha or do you practice vipassana? Or do you practice concentration meditation, or do you practice mindfulness meditation? And questions like, do you need jhana or do you not need jhana? And all the various kinds of views or experiences that come from those kind of questions. And it depends on who you ask and where they are, what tradition they're basing their teachings on, how they might answer that question. And it does seem like there's not just from differences between the commentaries and the canon, but also just between different ways that people teach, that these differences arise. And so what you're getting is my understanding, and if it conflicts with something that works for you, then just please take it for what it's worth. But that without going into a huge discourse around the whole thing, just my understanding is that we go back to that basic question of samatha and vipassana. Do you do samatha meditation or do you do vipassana meditation? Ajahn Chah and teachers in our tradition basically say that they're two ends of the same stick. You can't pick up one without picking up the other. That samatha and vipassana, which are roughly could be translated as like samatha's settled or calm, tranquility. Vipassana, usually translated as insight. That these aren't really actually particularly meditation techniques, as sometimes you hear, but that they are qualities that one develops through meditation, and that rather than saying you need one or you need the other, that you can develop them as completely separate contemplations, they're more clearly seen or clearly practiced as characteristics that we develop in fairly close tandem to each other. Sometimes one takes a stronger place in an individual practice, but that they always should be seen as something that one develops as one goes along together. And that oftentimes samatha is equated with developing concentration, the way that is defined samadhi when it's translated as concentration. It's sort of like you do samatha practice so that you develop concentration, and you do vipassana practice so that you develop mindfulness. And so, some people will say, well, I'm a mindfulness meditator. I don't worry about concentration. And so, well, how does that work with the teachings in the canon? And I think for me the best explanation comes from just starting with a question that Visakha, a layman, asks the nun Dhammadina, the Bhikkhuni Dhammadina. What is the basis for concentration? What is the basis for samadhi? Her answer is the four foundations or the four establishings of mindfulness are the basis for samadhi. And then the way that the Satipatthana Sutta reads, the foundations or the establishings of mindfulness reads, you can see pretty clearly that both the qualities of samatha and vipassana, calm and insight, are developed through the four Satipatthana. So you're starting with the Satipatthana as your basis for meditation, taking these four themes as the basis for your meditation, and that both samatha and vipassana develop from contemplation of any one of those aspects of the Satipatthana. And that as the mind develops both in settledness and clarity and calm, and as it starts to see more clearly the nature of phenomena that we're investigating, those two come together and the mind starts to gather into samadhi from that. So it all starts from the four Satipatthana, developing samatha and vipassana, and then pulling together or collecting in samadhi. Samadhi, I think, I think I've heard it mentioned that in the Thai forest tradition, the Thai Ajahns in Thai, the translation for samadhi comes out as something like the firm establishment of the mind, or the firm establishing of the mind, rather than concentration, which has a very strong, narrow, fixed, highly intense connotation to it. Other translations that I've heard for samadhi are collectedness, which is kind of a nice word. It's like it's pulling the mind together, not paying attention so much to distracting kinds of things, but just allowing it to collect and pull together into a more unified experience. Collectedness is a little bit clunky, I think, but another word is composure. So pulling the mind together rather than like this kind of pinpointed concentration. So samatha, vipassana, as they develop through these contemplations, as calm and insight develop, the mind pulls together and becomes composed, very settled, very clear, and very peaceful, and very open kind of an awareness, not very narrow, not fixed. And then from that composure of mind, one is able to more deeply and with repetition see the true nature of our experience. As one sees the true nature of our experience, a certain amount of disenchantment, dispassion starts to rise up because we see the habitual ways where we've taken refuge in many of the things around us, the world around us, our habits of mind, that just don't make sense anymore when you see them through the lens of Dhamma, through seeing them clearly with a clear, bright, composed mind. Then this sense of dispassion starts to arise for anything that's of a conditioned nature, that just reignites these old patterns that bring us into dukkha, into suffering. And with that dispassion, a sense of just wanting to relinquish and let go of those patterns. And that's what the realization of truth is all about, is this relinquishment of that which obstructs a true and genuine and very easeful, unentangled way of being in the world. So this is how I use some of these terms myself in my contemplation. And I think, as I was saying, any of the contemplations within the Satipatthana can lead to both samatha, vipassana, and can develop both a clarity and a calm and a very deep, insightful way of seeing the world, insight. And the 32 parts of the body that we chanted this morning is a good example as any as to how to do that. Kind of the way that I'll kind of go through this as a guided meditation can be more or less applied to any of the contemplations within the body contemplations in the first section of the Satipatthana, or the feelings, the mind, and then all the contemplations within the fourth section of Dhammas. So just keeping that in mind as to where it can lead, how these can be used. So let's just sit quietly for a minute here, compose the mind a little. Find a comfortable sitting posture. catching a few breaths, if your mind and body is settled, or just getting a sense of the whole body. Grounding yourself. Maybe take a few deep breaths just to energize and relax. And it's interesting that this reflection on the 32 parts of the body, and I'm just going from the way that it's presented in our chanting book that we chanted this morning, it's interesting that it begins with actually establishing a perception of the body as a whole. So contemplating this, which is my body, from the soles of the feet up and down from the crown of the head, is a sealed bag of skin filled with unattractive things. So get a sense of the whole body, from the soles of the feet up, down from the crown of the head. And I'll go through the 32 parts as a recitation. I'm just going to use the English in this situation. But just keeping in mind that this contemplation, even though it's referred to as an asubha practice, asubha meaning unattractive, subha being attractive, the word or the letter meaning negating it, so unattractive. It's also sort of a meditation that establishes not only the perception of the unattractive nature of the body, but also as a counter to desire, sensual desire, that can sometimes be really overwhelming. So as a way of helping to neutralize that, not to develop disgust or aversion, but just as a way to neutralize and see things truly, not letting sense desire control how we attend to the body, because sense desire will choose the attractive features or those things that will, verify or acknowledge or support that sensuality, that desire. That's the way it works, is it selectively chooses how we look at the body. So this is just saying, okay, well, let's get some reality going here, not to cause disgust or aversion in any way, but just to get a reality check on what it is that we're actually looking at. So there's that aspect of the 32 parts. In and of itself, it's just very calm and settling, even if there's not a strong component of sense desire present. It's just very settling. Just to go through the 32 parts. You can feel them to the extent that you can feel many of them, maybe not all of them very easily, and you can visualize them. So you have to kind of use your visual techniques as best you can to visualize these parts as we go through them, and also feel them as a tactile sensation to the best of your ability. So it's very settling, very cooling, and it also gives us insight into the true nature of the body, in its arising and in its passing and in its unsatisfactoriness as a place for refuge, and in its independent, not self aspect. And we'll go through that a little bit more. So just to start with, again, feeling this whole body from the soles of the feet up, down from the crown of the head. So in this body there are hair of the head, you can visualize it. Ajahn Chah would visually, in his mind's eye, take all of these 32 parts and just take them off of the body essentially, or apart from the body as a whole, and put it down in front as a single object to view from the mind's eye. You can try that if you wish. Or just in place. So hair of the head, and you can feel a little bit of tingling in the scalp. Hair of the body, similarly. Think of it as removed apart from the body in front of you, or stuck in various places over the torso and the legs and wherever hair of the body might be. Visualizing what a single one looks like, a single hair. Nails, fingernails, toenails. The older they get, the thicker they get. Sometimes kind of turn a little bit yellow. Sometimes you get little fungal infections on them that kind of make them crumbly. Teeth. You can feel the hardness of them as they touch each other. Visualize them as kind of this white, bony protuberances from the gums. Visualize your own teeth. Mine are kind of crooked. Skin covers the whole exterior part of the body. Close up, look at it close up, you can see little scales, and oftentimes there's things like moles on them, brown or darker colored. Sometimes you get a little hair growing out of one of the moles. Skin. So hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin. These are the 5 primary external parts of the body that we can just use that as a single contemplation, because that's what we are seeing usually when we look at ourselves in the mirror, when we look at somebody else. We see, of course, other things too, like eyes and other features that aren't part of this particular list. But this is it's not trying to be anatomically perfect, it's just using it for contemplation. Moving inwards. Flesh, the muscle tissues, the arms and of the thighs, back and abdomen. You can visualize below the layer of skin what muscle tissue looks like. If you're having a hard time visualizing it, just think of a roast beef or a steak or some other part of an animal that we turn into meat, eat. Flesh looks the same really in the human body. You can feel it too, where the flesh underneath the skin is contacting the hard surface. Sinews, tendons and ligaments. You can see them most easily on the back of your hand. If you want, take a look and flex your fingers and see all of those tendons coursing through the hand. They're all over the body, connecting joints and bones, muscles to each other. Bones. See if you can pull up an image of the skeleton. This in itself is sometimes just by itself, without all the other parts, a primary object of contemplation, visualizing skeleton, the skull, eye sockets without eyes, two holes where the nasal cavity is, and the mouth, the jaw, the bones of the jaw, the neck and spine, and shoulder bones, back, the scapula, back of the bones, back of the back, the spine descending down with the rib cage wrapped around the spine, attached to the spine, where the spine goes down to the bottom, ends in the tailbone, connects into the hips, where the femur bones, the thigh bones connect into the pelvis, going down the kneecaps, the joint between the thigh bone and the lower two bones of the leg, two small bones, the tibia and the fibula, shin bone and the bone behind it, down to the ankles, the bones of the feet and the toes, going back up and seeing the arms come out of the shoulders, upper arm, elbow, two bones of the lower arm, and the hands and the finger bones. And just pull together an image of that skeleton and feel the density in your body. Feel the density of these bones as they contact each other on surfaces. Bone marrow, a little harder to experience, but you can visualize deep within the bone. It's kind of spongy material, sort of semi-solid. And then to the internal organs, the kidneys, which are more towards the back, midway down the back, but interior, two little kidneys. The heart, right under the breastbone. If you're quiet, you can actually feel the heart beating. Visualize the heart, about the size of your fist. And then feel it beating. And the liver, over on the right-hand side, just underneath the edge of the rib cage. Membranes are all these connective tissues throughout the abdomen, that kind of hold things in place so that they don't kind of just fly around and settle in weird places. Spleen, sort of nondescript lump on the left-hand side in the abdomen. Gray lump. And the lungs underneath the rib cage, spongy, pink. You can feel them expand and contract. The bowels. The bowels and the entrails, the small intestine. So the large intestine, the small intestine. Many, many feet of kind of shiny, kind of squishy tubes all wound in there, stuffed in the abdominal cavity. Undigested food in the stomach. Kind of a liquid, solid conglomeration of breakfast or your main meal of the day, transforming until it becomes excrement as it passes through into the large intestine. Visualize that coursing through the intestines, absorbing water, becoming more solid. Bile, the green fluid that helps digest fats, produced in the liver, secreted into the bottom part of the stomach, the upper part of the intestine, through the bile duct. Phlegm, what we cough up when we have a cold. Pus, which fluids and white blood cells, when we have an infection, comes out, pop a pimple. Blood throughout the entire body, being pumped around by the heart. Sometimes you can feel little pulses of blood surging through at the wrist or in the neck. Sweat. Fat is considered to be a liquid. These are all the liquid parts now. Yellow fat, kind of semi-solid, semi-liquid underneath the skin. Tears from the eyes. Skin grease. Oily skin. Spittle from the mouth. Mucus from the nose and other places. We have a cold and we see lots of mucus. Oil of the joints, little sacks of liquid that help lubricate joints. Urine inside the body, inside the bladder. And then, of course, we pee it out. And lastly, brain, visualizing that in the skull. Convoluted and contained in its protective shell. So we've taken these 32 parts separately, considered them separately. Now we can kind of pull it back together into this body as a whole. This then, which is my body from the soles of the feet up and down from the crown of the head, is a sealed bag of skin filled with unattractive things. So this is the bare contemplation. Just sit with that image or any image that might come up or might have come up from going through the parts, pulling it back together as a whole. Just see if you can sit there with any sensations or images that come up for a minute or two. So I find it very cooling, very soothing. I hope others do too. Just in and of itself, the mind settles, becomes calm. Samatha, anything that helps settle. Anything skillful nature that helps settle the mind, any contemplation that helps settle, samatha. In each of the four contemplations or the four satipatthana, there's also what is sometimes referred to as the refrain, which points out that one can contemplate, in this instance, let's say this body, also in its various forms of internally or externally, meaning one's own body or the bodies of others, although most teachers strongly suggest starting with one's own body until you have a firm foundation of practice with visualizing and feeling your own body parts. Internally, externally, in their arising or vanishing nature, rising, passing away, both in terms of the immediate experience of sensations of the body or images, and also in its greater context of coming into being with birth, watching it as it ages, goes through development, grows, and then declines, becomes weak again, and then passes away. So it's a rising and vanishing nature, both right here and now, and over time. And then there's a very I think insightful clause at the very end of that refrain. It goes something like, or else one is mindful, there is a body. Quote, there is a body. Just to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and mindfulness. So it sounds kind of simplistic, there is a body. Well, yeah, of course, there is a body. But if you take it just as contemplating the body in and of itself without any judgment, projections, just here it is, sitting right here, there is a body. Start to get a little bit of a hint of, it's not you, it's breathing on its own, the heart is beating on its own. Do you really have any control over that? Do you really have any control over when it gets sick, or the aging process, or its eventual passing? It's a body living according to nature. Right now it's sitting here, going through its various functions, just doing what it does as a part of nature. Not me, not mine. Just allow that perception to really take hold and really pay attention to all the little involuntary twitches or movements or sensations that happen, whether you have any conscious awareness, conscious control. You have no conscious control over most of it. You can move it a little bit, you can do a few things, you can put the right stuff into it, but basically it just follows the laws of nature, independent of what you might wish. Just be with that contemplation for the rest of this session.